Councillor Sanderson.
Mr Chair, I'll raise a couple of perceived. First, in relation to 10.3.3, the green scheme. One of the successful recipients is holding an event in the Meribah precinct in November for 1 day. My wife has a business in the Meribah precinct, but there's definitely no direct benefit to her business, and I intend to stand a ring and vote on that matter. Secondly, in relation to item 10.3.4, which is the application for Motorsports facility. In past meetings, I've declared a proceed in relation to this project. Ben Collingwood, the current president of the project, assisted me in my 2012 election campaign, but did not provide any financial support. So I don't believe that the matters stated prohibit me from voting on the matter and acting in the best interests of the community. So I'll stand on that.
Okay. There's no mayoral minutes today. There's quite a few supplementaries, councillors, so we'll just we'll search and find them as we go. Item 5.1, the ordinary meeting on 27th of September, page 4 to 28. I have a mover for that. Councillor Chapman. Seconder, Councillor Madden. Councillor Chapman. No. Councillor Madden. No. We go to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Unanimous. Mr CEO, we had public participation this morning.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. It's my pleasure to be able to talk very briefly to provide council with an update on the outcomes of public participation. It was very pleasing to see that we had 7 people that wanted to talk to the council today. The first person that participated in public participation was Les Lewis, the President of Poona Community Progress Association. He raised with the council his concern in relation to the lack of infrastructure improvements within Poona and want to know from the council what is being planned and when will additional infrastructure be put in place. The second participant was Mr Mike Hart. Mr Hart raised his concerns about the channel silting up and its impact on the usability of the current boat ramp, and he was looking for a commitment from council to support the proposed new boat ramp further upstream of the creek. Third participant was Ms Edna Ray. Ms Ray was concerned about the lack of walkways on the foreshore to cater for residents who have mobility issues, and she wants the council to work with the community to look at options to resolve the issue going forward. The fourth participant was Mr Paul Thwaites. Mr Thwaites was concerned about the drop in property values in Poona and believes that this is largely due to a lack of community infrastructure within Poona. He wanted the council to improve infrastructure to address this issue. The fifth participant was Mr Peter Hind. Mr Hind was concerned about traffic on the road, the gazetted road near the former old toilet block, and he wants the council to have a look at this issue to try and address the noise and dust concerns. He'd also like the council to consider putting up signage, in particular no camping and no motorhome signing in the area as well. The sixth participant was Ben Collingwood. Mr Collingwood talked to the proposed motorsports complex that's before the council today, item 10.3.4, and during his presentation he advised that staging plan and noise impact assessment will be provided to facilitate further development stages. And the last participant was Mr Graham Road. Mr Road advised the council that the Australian Institute for Disaster Resilience will review the National Doctrine for Emergency Warning Arrangements in 2017-18 and consider his proposals and suggestions. He also provided an update on other disaster resilience matters, including BOM recently changing their flood gauge warning printouts to include national colour code coloured lines for height range flooding. And finally, in his presentation, He provided an overview of the early development and history of Poona and congratulated the Poona community for their efforts in delivering today's community.
We have a mover of that. Councillor Seymour. Seconded, Councillor Light. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Unanimous. No deputations. Any petitions, councillors? You want to just grab the microphone, Peter? We'll have one on that side.
Yep. Yeah, I have a couple here, Mr. Chairman. I have one here with 17 signatures on it. The chief petitioner is E.T. Bull from Muscat Flat out in my part of the world. And it's a petition bringing to the council's attention the condition of that road out there. And they're asking all councillors to go out there and have a look at it. I'll refer this to the CEO for a response. And the second one, which I'll have to just flag today and take back, there's 180 signatures on this one. The chief petitioner is Mark Ward from Aldershot, and it just says that with the undersigned request the upgrading, oh no, that's the wrong one, hang on. They actually want to keep the markets in where they are in Alina Street at this point in time. So it's been up to the upper end of Alina Street while the roadworks have been happening, and 180 people have signed this to keep that, but he forgot to sign the petition as the chief petitioner, so I'll have to take it back to him and then table it in the future.
Okay. Thanks, councillor. We move that those petitions be accepted. Councillor Hanson, that petition I mean. Councillor Hanson, seconded. Councillor Everard. Those in favour? Carried unanimous. Okay. Item 9.1, the advisory committee meeting for Wide Bay Water, pages 29 to 33. I have a mover. Sorry. Move Councillor Taylor. Seconder, Councillor Madden. Councillor Taylor. Comfy. Councillor Madden. Councillors, those in favour? Unanimous. And open resolutions register item 10.1.1 on page 34 to 45. You got a question, Councillor Seymour?
Just about the second one on the first page about the Threatened Species Action Plan. It talks about us calling for quotations in mid-September. Is that, have we missed that, or?
Mr. Mayor, I'd have to refer that to the Director of
Tony?
Okay.
Oh, sorry, taken on notice?
Yep.
Yep. Mover. Someone like to move that the open resolutions register? Councillor Everard. Seconded, Councillor Light. It's very hard to look along the... Don't forget you, David. Okay. Moved by Councillor Everard, seconded by Councillor Light. Those in favour? Carried unanimous. Now we're going to move item 10.3.4, which is the Motorsports facility, to be the next item, councillors. And it's just that we've got a lot of members of the Motorsports facility here, and a lot of them, I'm sure, have left work or have to get back to work. So but feel free to stay, but we'll discuss this item now. Now, it's supplementary agenda number 2. Item 10.3.4. Am I going to move it for that? Councillor Truscott? Councillor Everard, a seconder? Any? Where's the recommendation?
Can I just get some clarification? There were some amendments suggested last night. Has that been a new document that's before to the council, or will we have to make those amendments now?
Through you, Mr Mayor. Those amendments have been recorded by the meeting secretariat, and as that is a revised officer recommendation, they're actually already in the documentation. We can certainly read through those, so I can take you through those now for the purposes of recording
Thank you.
the meeting. So councillors, as per the advice last night, following further review of the report, the officers have been able to recommend some changes to the conditions, and I'll just go through those for you. So first of all, in respect of condition 9 relating to stormwater management, it is intended, this is just advice, the commentary is that it is intended that stormwater infrastructure be provided to service each stage of the development. Condition 9 has therefore been amended accordingly. Apologies, we don't have this on a screen for you. That would be our normal practice. And so condition 9 now reads, design and construct internal and external stormwater drainage infrastructure to service stage 1 of the development. So stage 1 of the development is the change. The rest of the condition reads as per your document. Page 199. So going over to condition 21 relating to electricity. Oh, sorry, I'm just bringing it up now. I'm just looking at my notes as well. And that is condition 21. You bring that up for me. It's on page 21. Condition 21. 201. Page 201. Yes, so condition 21 at the moment reads that the electricity, the development is to be provided with a reticulated power connection and supply under standard tariff conditions. The officer's revised recommendation is that given that it is noted that owing to the restriction of operating hours and the scale of the development for stage 1, any limited requirement for power supply could be met by solar panels with battery storage or generator. As such, condition 21 can be deleted and the requirement for reticulated power can be delayed until later stages. Accordingly, condition 21 is deleted in the officer recommendation. And the subsequent conditions will be renumbered. And finally, regarding condition 22, which is on page 201, at the bottom of page 201, regarding street lighting, development engineering officers in consultation with DTMR have determined that flag lighting at the entry intersection is necessary for the safety of all road users. Notwithstanding the restriction of operating hours, vehicle movements for up to 50 competitor vehicles, many towing car trailers, and 150 spectators and volunteers are anticipated to be exiting the site into 100 km/h speed environment until 6 p.m, which is outside of daylight hours for 3 months of the year. Owing to the restriction of operating hours and scale of development for stage 1, the limited need for power supply for internal lighting could be met by solar panels with battery storage or generator. Accordingly, condition 22 has been amended to remove the need for reticulated internal street lighting, and I'll just read the amended condition. so condition 22 now reads, provide flag street lighting on Maryborough Cooloola Road at the vehicle access for the development site. The entry exit to the site must be clearly marked and well lit by bollard or overhead lighting in accordance with the planning scheme policy for development works SC 6.3.9.2. The rest of the condition has been deleted.
Thank you. Yep. So moved by Councillor Truscott, seconded by Councillor Everard. Councillor Truscott.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just happy to move this motion, and just want to pass on my appreciation for the staff for the work that they've undertaken in getting it to this point, and to the applicant and the supporters that are here today. I'm grateful that Council were able to amend these requirements to stage the development of the process, and I think it's a great thing. It's no secret that I've been a very proactive supporter of this project since prior to my election into Council. I believe this project has a great potential for the future of Maryborough, the Fraser Coast and the Wide Bay, and it's great that we got to drive past it, the side entrance here this morning. The economic benefits that this long-term project has the potential to reach for our region are enormous, and I'm very pleased to be in this position of working with the committee and with the council to take this initial step. So thank you for that, and I think should this application be successful, that I think this will really help the club in being able to secure more interest and financial support in taking it to those next stages, and I really look forward to that happening. So thank you.
Councillor Everard.
Lucky it's a council's. I didn't mean that. Look, this is a great move forward, I think, for the region. This project has been around for a while. There's been many a conversation with Ben and members of his committee about it. Look, this is a part of the jigsaw puzzle that is the future of the Fraser Coast. I do think that the Fraser Coast future is firmly centred around events and sporting activities. The more of those that we can get, the better that our region will be, and who knows, the development up the road may push up the property prices in Poona. There you go, you could have a heap of car enthusiasts move in. So this has been a long time coming, and really looking forward to coming out and volunteering and picking up rubbish there one day, Ben.
Councillor, any councillors against this?
So just two questions, well, at this stage. In relation to the condition relating to condition 29 on page 203, it talks about the hours of operation of all approved uses of the premises are limited to 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. 7 days per week, excluding public holidays. I just want clarification. Obviously, there may be uses that are defined in here. I assume you're talking about the actual use of the facility for public purpose, not, for example, if they need to access it to conduct cleaning, or if they need to access it to do other activity, be it certain meetings that aren't anticipated and outside the scope of what would be normal for a motor centre. And also, you did mention in the notes that there would be some vehicular traffic leaving outside, after the competition that could take some time. Is that condition considered in that in that process?
Thank you, Councillor Taylor, for that question. Through you, Mr Mayor, I'll just invite the planning officer responsible for the report to comment on that. He has been working on this for some time and is very familiar with all of the requirements.
Through the Chair, Councillor, just to clarify, that condition really relates to the conduct of the events and the activities associated with the motorsport facility and, racing cars around the track and so on. So It does provide some flexibility in the end of that condition where it talks about unless otherwise approved by the assessment manager. So that allows for the likes of if there is an event proposed to be on a public holiday, for example, that can be facilitated through negotiation and a degree of informal assessment, but it doesn't mean that it needs to come back for any changes to the development approval. It certainly is framed around the noise emitting activities of an event and the motor racing activities associated with it. It doesn't limit the ability for facility maintenance and administrative processes occurring outside of those hours where it doesn't have an impact on the surrounding environment.
So could you change the word uses to events in that?
Yes, that could be further clarified.
So that's just to clarity that you're seeking to change. I'm sure people can hear me, but I'll be seeking to change on item on condition 29, the word uses changes to events. And I guess my only clarification is if an event goes to 5 o'clock and it takes 2 hours for people to leave the area, because often one of the hardest parts of any event is getting people to leave the time
Yeah.
in the way. And sometimes safety will prohibit them. Will this condition put them in breach if departing the event considered part of the event?
Through the Chair, just to clarify that those hours of operations were proposed by the applicant and the supporting application material identified that an event would run generally between 8 and 5 and allowing for an hour for departure of participants and volunteers and people attending as a spectator to exit the site. Certainly there would be, once again, some flexibility to allow for an extension of those hours for people to depart the premises if there was a queue of traffic. But at this stage of development and the anticipated scale of it, it's not expected that that event would generate so many spectators and vehicle movements that it would take 2 hours to exit the site.
Sorry, CEO?
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Just, I note the response in terms of the permitted uses, and I'd just like to get your advice if the word use was changed on the event, given that the whole of the application is about material change of use and it identifies permitted uses. If we change that word to event, does that change the nature, potentially change the nature of the permit, and could that cause us problems further down the track in terms of enforcement, because it's not a material change of event, but it's a material change of use. I'm just wondering from a planning perspective, from the planning court perspective, whether that change of the word from use to event may cause us problems down the track.
Well, potentially, and we could look at wording to try and make it clarified further that it really is associated, like the approved use is essentially a motor racing event on that off-road racetrack for stage 1, and the intent of that condition is to reflect what was proposed in the application material for the duration of the events during the day. But more specifically, the condition is seeking to protect the amenity of the surrounding environment by limiting the operations to those hours. So we could look at some words that clarify the difference between the use and the event and people leaving the site. So it really is about those motorsport activities occurring within those hours.
Councillor Light?
Sorry, David, I'll just be a second. I do challenge about the timing in terms after the event is finished, about an hour or so. I can tell you through, as you're aware, of 30 years of motorsport, people socialise, people might have issues with cars or transporters, officials particularly, will be hanging around for multiple different reasons. And I would suggest an hour after an event, even with a smaller racetrack like Morgan's Park, wouldn't be realistic whatsoever.
It's going to be hard enough to get everyone out of this room now.
Exactly. I'm sure, as people know in the room, I've done a bit of motorsport my time, and I would suggest to you it is hours after the event for multiple different
Through the chair, if that was the case, we'd probably look at wanting to reconsider the changes to internal lighting and power supply for that same purpose, if that was to be the case. The basis of this assessment and the conditions as they're structured are on the understanding that things are wrapped up within generally those daylight hours.
I withdraw my request to change the events and leave the uses and having procedures. If there's any issues, we can address them later on, but don't attack with them. I think we should proceed.
Councillor Lewis, do you have a question? You're right.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone speaking against this proposal? Yeah, well, that's right. Councillor Light said only if they're game would they vote against this. Okay, anyone else would like to make comment? Paul?
I just, again, I know I've repeated myself, but we can look at those amendments, changes to the use in terms of the timing and at a later date. That's not a big issue, but I'm just saying it is going to be several hours for competitors and officials to leave the grounds.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Truscott, seconded by Councillor Everard. Those in favour? Those against? Congratulations, Wide Bay Motorsports. Well done. As we drove down today, I drove down with Councillor Chapman. He said, how about we take a left turn in there and give it a bit of a burn? I said, I don't think today would be the day. Congratulations. Item 10.3.1, which is on pages 46 to 102. Yes, you definitely need the microphone. You'd like to move this, Councillor Chapman? Is there a seconder? There's Councillor Light. Councillor Chapman?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yes, Mr. Mayor, I look at this, so I'd like to move a motion that for the proposed development seeks a preliminary approval. This is a 20-storey building which is going into Urangan, into the harbour precinct. And what I look at is this is a way in the future that communities can grow. It's been noted that we've got to try and bring people into areas so the infrastructure in those areas can actually grow. And I feel that this facility coming into Urangan where it is, right beside the harbour, it's not impeding anyone's vision, or there is a shadowing effect across Boat Harbour Drive, but for a very limited time. I look at this as a growth to our region, not just to Hervey Bay, but a growth to our region. Because what this does is they're looking at maybe a retirement village down the track, but they look at jobs. Those jobs flow on to visitations for people coming to this region, and then that flows on to shopping within our region and in our areas. And I really feel that this will be the start of moving forward with a greater region, and I'm right behind this project, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Light?
I agree with Councillor Chapman's comments in terms of this project. We can look in the rear vision mirror about high-storey buildings and the impact it does, but the reality is that they can be facilitated in particular nodes of development. And on the finance side of things is that these type of buildings will generate quite a considerable amount of rateable income
terms of the footprint that currently, and that can be for the benefit of everyone in the region. We can wish for these things to stand away or stay away from our region, but it's only a matter of time. It's not now. If it's not now, it will be next year or the following year or another term of council. As long as it's done sensibly, which this one is, and we think about how we're doing this, it's a way to move this region forward.
Thank you. Any councillor would like to speak against this motion?
Yeah, I'll speak against it.
Councillor Seymour.
Yeah, so this has come to us as a code assessable development because the planning scheme was changed. This means that there's been no public notification and no public opportunity for members of the public and the community that are affected, for example, by shading, or who have views on the way that Harvey Bay is developing towards high-rises, have not had an opportunity to make public submissions. That is the law under our code because we changed it, but I think it makes us more incumbent on us to assess it against the planning scheme that did go out that people could see, and this fails wanting in terms of that planning scheme. I think assessing preliminary approvals is quite dangerous in circumstances like this where there's so much outstanding. As people are aware, this doesn't meet the planning scheme guidelines in terms of setbacks, which should be 35 metres to the esplanade. This is 6 or 8. So it's well inside of what was in the planning scheme, which people did have an opportunity to view. But so in terms of not, so this is set back, so it's currently 6 metres to the esplanade, whereas the acceptable outcome seeks the 35 metre setback. So it's well outside that aspect, which was put to the community. But other than that, in terms of preliminary approval, I think it's quite dangerous for us to be assessing this now when there is so much outstanding in terms of required reports, in terms of accommodating this within our planning scheme. So for example, it still requires an acoustic impact assessment report. They haven't submitted that. It still requires an aviation operations safety strategy, which again has not been submitted, an ecological assessment report, which would be quite good because they plan on removing every single shrub, tree, and piece of vegetation on it. It still requires amended plans of development incorporating parking, end-of-trip facilities, strategy for waste management, swept paths for HRV vehicles, car parking location numbers and access arrangements, commercial and community use car parking locations, details of any proposed pedestrian access restriction measures, details of provision for parking and access routes for people with a disability, details of communal open space facilities, details of commercial community uses. It still requires an acid sulfate soils assessment and management plan. It still requires a specific bushfire hazard assessment and management plan. It still requires a flood and stormwater management assessment report, which is quite important. They still require to submit design documentation relating to necessary infrastructure networks, services, and utilities. It still requires a full flood study report. It still requires a traffic impact assessment. It still requires a pedestrian and cycle management plan. It still requires a public transport strategy, a water supply assessment, a sewer reticulation assessment, a street lighting plan, an internal easements plan, a bulk earthworks plan, an operational works application for all signs and advertising devices. What I'm saying is that for something that is, and it's been pointed to before, that this is quite different to anything that's ever been approved or considered before for the region, we should be looking over it very carefully to ensure that it is compliant with the planning scheme, which is extremely permissive in this regard. It was pretty much changed to allow it, but that doesn't mean we should still assess it quite vigorously and ensure that it is consistent with the community's expectations in our planning scheme. As you'll see in the shading diagrams, this does shade neighboring streets, neighboring properties, so it's got quite a lot of impact on that community. As you can see by the outstanding reports, we don't know in terms of traffic management and other issues. So I don't think this is ready for approval, for preliminary approval, and I'll be voting no.
I've just got a question of Director. This is this is a preliminary approval. Would you just like to explain the difference between a preliminary approval and the detailed approval that Councillor Seymour was speaking about. Thank you.
That's better. Yep, thanks. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I certainly note Councillor Seymour's comments. I think what's important to remember here is that it is only a preliminary approval and it doesn't provide any authority for any works to commence on site. And I think Councillor Seymour's summary of the requirements that still have to be met in order for a development permit to be issued is very sound. It's actually identified in the report that those are requirements that will be available to Council for further assessment. So as noted in the report, further development applications seeking a development permit for material change of use and operational works will be required. This will afford Council the opportunity to assess the proposed development in greater detail against the provisions of the current planning scheme and other relevance and standards before the development can proceed. Conditions outlining the required supporting information to be submitted with any relevated development application are included in the recommendation. I think the other point that's really important here, and I do have the Executive Manager for Development and Planning here to talk in more detail, but just more broadly, the proposed development reflects the intent for this precinct. So as noted, Council did amend the planning scheme to provide for this form of development, and it's considered that the proposed development is consistent with the overall design intent, the preferred land uses outlined in the planning scheme amendment. The master plan envisages 20 stories with a maximum of 80 metres. I think this is dying. And while there are certain so while that's not working at all, is it? Yep. Okay. So while there are certain areas where the identified acceptable solution in the scheme are not specifically provided for, we have to remember that we're talking about performance-based planning here, and the requirement is for the development to achieve the performance outcomes in the planning scheme.
Thank you. Can I have a councillor for? Oh, sorry. That's right.
That's it. Which is what it's this overall preliminary approval would do. It provides for pedestrian connectivity upgrade for the Esplanade Boat Harbour Drive intersection, active engagement at ground level, and unique dining experience with the proposed rooftop level capturing views of the bay. It's an economic generator for the region, and this is an area where Council has anticipated an intensity of development and an increase in residential population. Mr Mayor, if there are detailed questions about the assessment process, I can certainly ask that the Executive Manager address those in more detail.
Is there a councillor speaking for? Councillor Madden? I'm going to need that. Sorry. You got the croaky voice too.
Oh yes, it is working. I'll be short about this, but I guess I come from a slightly different perspective to some of the other councillors. If you're someone who's looking to invest in development, and particularly something like this, there's a huge amount of expense involved in preparing all the reports. So the process, I think, is an appropriate process which allows an investor to come in and say, well, I'd like to do this, this is what it's going to look like, or what we think it'll look like. How does Council feel about that, without them having to go through the process of providing all of those other reports, which are hugely expensive and very, very time consuming? So as an investor, you come in and say, how does this look? Council comes back and says, well, in principle, we think it would look like this. That then gives the investor the opportunity to make a decision at that point, to either go ahead with the project and provide all the hugely expensive reports. It also gives Council the opportunity to impose conditions or change conditions as a result of those reports. But no investor is going to come in and do all of that reporting without having some indication as to whether council will or will not approve that type of development. So I take George's point, but I also understand the investment issues around that.
Councillor against? Councillor Lewis?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm against this proposal, although I suppose it's an argument that was lost quite a long time before I was on council, in the sense that the real opportunity to oppose this kind of development perhaps faded when the plan was changed to allow 20-storey buildings in this precinct. Nonetheless, I still want to say a couple of things about it. I was working with some consultants to the council just recently, people with a vast amount of experience across the state in terms of local government. And one of them said to me, I hadn't been to Hervey Bay before, what I really like about it is how you've limited your building height to 6 or 7 stories. It has a terrific ambience. It's a great achievement. It really makes this place different from other places. I said, well, I've got news for you. But he was right. I mean, approving a 20-storey building, or what could be a collection of 20-storey buildings, is going to change the way our city of Hervey Bay looks, and it's going to change it forever. I am concerned about it. I simply think that it's not necessary for us to, for all of the reasons that, for instance, Councillor Chapman has advanced, it's not necessary for us to go to 20 stories in a place like Urangan or in elsewhere in Hervey Bay to achieve that kind of development, that kind of growth, that kind of opportunity. I understand that these issues are never easy, that there are always arguments both ways, and I don't criticise everyone or anyone for having a different view from mine, but nonetheless, my view is we can achieve all of those things and still maintain a city which doesn't go to 20 stories, just as Noosa has done. And Noosa, I would suggest, is as delightful a part of the Sunshine Coast as any. In terms of the particular plan, I note, as Councillor Seymour's noted, that the plan requires a setback of 35 metres, whereas this particular application will have a setback ranging, in terms of Boat Harbour Drive, ranging from 6 to around about the 6 metres, perhaps a little higher in places, but certainly as limited as 6, and 8 metres from the western and northern boundaries. I appreciate that overall the site coverage is within the requirements, but nonetheless the effect of it is that the buildings get very close to Boat Harbour Drive, and so the view, the amenity from Boat Harbour Drive, remember this is an area where we have very little open space anyway, the amenity from Boat Harbour Drive is severely adversely impacted by a reduction of the setback from 35 metres to 6 metres. I think that the building could have achieved its ambitions without limiting the setback, certainly to something like 20% of what the planning documentation requires. I understand the argument, which will be, look, a 35-metre setback is a long way. It may impact on the economics of the building. I don't think it would impact on the economics of the building, but by the same token, if I, as a councillor, am going to be limited by the amendments to the town plan in the last term, then the developers need to be limited by those very same amendments, and some of them will favour them, but some of them will be against them. And one of the ones that's against them is the requirement for a 35-metre setback. I don't think it's appropriate that the developer cherry-pick which parts of the amendments to the plan suit him and which parts don't. So on that basis, I'll be voting against it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any councillor for? Another councillor for the project? No. Against? Councillor Hanson? Sorry.
I'd like to speak nice and loud, Mr. Chairman.
No, pass it down.
My voice came back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's working. That's good. Yeah, look, I'm stuck kind of between a rock and a hard place with this. Everyone knows that I voted against those amendments when they were introduced to change the planning scheme. I think that was towards the end of the last term of the last council. I understand all the arguments that Councillor Chapman had put forward and Councillor Madden had put forward, and they're very sound arguments. But I still believe that Hervey Bay has its uniqueness. I believe people come there because of that uniqueness. Do we really want to become another Gold Coast or Sunshine Coast? I've been in a lot of places in the world, and one place that really sticks out is when you go to Hawaii. The main island there where everyone goes to is just like a concrete jungle, but when you go to the island of Kauai, where they've limited high-rise buildings, it's much more pleasant and they have many more visitors. But because the developer has not met all these requirements, I think we shouldn't be approving this, and on those bases I'll be voting against it.
Another councillor for? Another councillor against? Yep. I'd just like to speak for this proposal before you have right of reply. We need to send a message out that we're wanting jobs in our region. This is a great proposal. It's preliminary proposal. If you send out a message to developers, they'll look at economics of this and begin to steer clear from our region. We have 25% youth unemployment. We're in a low socio-economic area. We're looking for economic generators here, and this will be a great one. I look at a proposal, hopefully, that would go forward. You've got a restaurant up on the top. So many of the young kids could be working in that area as chefs. I was away at an LGAQ conference over the weekend, and the push towards increased tourism in Queensland, it's going to be huge. Overseas people are wanting to come, and we've got so many features on the Fraser coast that these people are looking for. So I'm saying the economy of our region needs as much encouragement as we can muster. To put out the feelers to say we're not looking at anything. I mean, the businesses around the Urangan Harbour, they're not on Glory Street, they're struggling. They're needing more impetus down there. The marina needs more activity. We're needing more tourists. That's what creates jobs. That's what I believe we as councillors got elected for, was to improve the economy and put the message out there. So I will be voting in favour of this. Any other councillor against? No. For? Right of reply, Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just look at some of the things that were brought up in the negative side of this debate today, and I think it's great that we can look at the negative sides of things. But the main thing we've got to look here today, councillors, is positivity. All these people are asking is a preliminary approval. A preliminary approval to go ahead and then do the work on the extra designs and put in front of our council officers like any other DA comes up. But for us to say here today that we do not even accept your preliminary approval, you're actually turning industry away from our region. We need to grow our region here. We need to give people that want to come into our region with money in their pocket and spend that money in our pocket, we've got to give them confidence that we want them in our region. We don't know what the next development is after this one for this developer, and a lot of the times if they've got confidence in an area such as like the Auscare project in Hervey Bay, which has just been opened, they've got confidence in Hervey Bay because they know that we're behind their projects. And there's another approval, there's another application they're looking at bringing up to us. So it's all about economic growth and development. This today is for a preliminary approval. This is to give these developers confidence. There was things spoken today about shading. There's going to be shading on other residents. The shading is for a very short period of time, which may be even an hour, but that shading doesn't even go on to the building footprint on the neighbouring block. It goes onto the footpath and it goes onto the landscaping near the front. But here we are, they're saying shading is going to be a big problem. I don't think it is. I think the big problem is a vote against this today is a vote against the confidence for our future economy within this region. Give these people confidence, vote for this project, and let's move on. And one other thing I'd like to just point while I've got the microphone, the 6 metre setback. There's a big concern, there's councillors here saying about a 6 metre setback should be 35 metre setback. You can walk along the Torquay Esplanade and there's coffee shops with a 0 metre setback there that have been built. Do we worry because their glass fronts come up to their boundary line? We don't. This here is going to have retail shops in the bottom area of it, and it's going to have a setback of 6 metres back to those shops. 35 metres to me, when you look at this plan, is absolutely ridiculous. The ground cover that we've got on this site is very minimum, and the use of the car parking is very high. I think this is a great design, and I think a vote today against this project is showing that you do not want to see your future region move forward with growth, with confidence. Mr Mayor, I will be voting firmly for this project, and I'd like all my other councillors to back me up to move this across the line, to give these developers confidence within our region. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to the vote on that. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those against? 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Item 10.3.2, Bushfire Management, page 103 to 108. Moved by Councillor Light. The seconder, Councillor Chapman, the two fireys. Councillor Light.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Moving this this motion for the Bushfire Management Plan, I would like to take this opportunity to mention about capacity, perception of the community in terms of bushfire management in the region, and in fact probably all across Australia. I have some experience in the Rural Fire Service in New South Wales, and it is a degree of frustration, and even more so here in council, where constituents and residents believe that that large-scale hazard reduction should take place. The fact is that we've got hundreds of thousands of hectares of bush, and the other fact is that we're reliant on the professional volunteers to do that. They're the ones that are equipped, they're the ones that have the vehicles, they're the ones that have the training. You can't expect these incredible volunteers to do these large-scale hazard reduction. It's way beyond their capacity. On top of that, people might not realise that a number of years, and I am using a New South Wales example here, in one particular year when I was in the Rural Fire Service, out of 365 days, 16 days we could burn. It was usually too hot, too windy, too wet, and what it is. So the limitations of the opportunity to do hazard reduction in a calendar year, here in Queensland as well, is very limited. So I ask the residents and the community to respect the capacity of our current rural firefighters and our permanent firefighters, to work with council, and the fact is that we cannot take large-scale hazard reduction on. It is virtually impossible. Thanks.
Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to thank the CEO and the officers for bringing this report together to council. It was my concern about a month ago. I'm actually a rural firefighter in the Nikenbar area, and it was my concern about a month ago when we had big, very dry, very heavy fire loads, I felt there was problems in areas where we could not get appliances in. I wasn't looking at just looking after farmland. I was mainly looking after residential properties, And this was a concern that I thought that if we've got fire breaks in, you can use these fire breaks to backburn off, and when you go into a fire, there's an officer there that's in charge of the fire. He will address, is it safe to take a vehicle in or not? If it's not safe, he will not let you go in there. But if there is a fire break there, it is something that can be used. I've sat down with the council officers, which was a great meeting, and they pointed out to me there's 77 kilometres of fire breaks within this region to maintain. That's a big expense when we're trying to maintain roads and everything like that. But they've also pointed out that they've looked at areas where there's residents and they've put fire breaks. They're trying to work on fire breaks behind where the residents are so people can get access. So I'm quite comfortable now that there is stuff being done out there to try and look after the fire management. And like Councillor Light said, we can't just go and burn every year, but we've got to be responsible for when we do burn, that we burn in the right time. And some of these rural fire appliances that we've got now are the state of the art, some of the best appliances you get around. You can hop out of one brigade and hop into another one's and everything's the same. So we've got the gear there now to maintain this, and with this report, I'm confident that I will see this happen. Thank you.
Any councillor against this motion? No? We'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimous. Item 10.3.3. There's a couple of councillors who'll be leaving. Page 109 to 115. Okay, I'll have a mover of this. Beg your pardon? Sorry. Councillor Lewis.
Look, as per page 110 of the agenda, I was on the selection committee for the community grant scheme, not for the regional event scheme.
No. It's a question.
Yes, I mean, as I understand it, I was requested by the staff if I would join the panel, as I assume Councillor Everard was in relation to the other one, presumably on the basis that a lot of this, comes within my portfolio requirement. As I understand it, it's common to have a councillor on those sorts of assessment panels, as for instance I'm also on the Regional Art Development Fund assessment panel.
Item 10.3.3, have we got a mover? Mover Councillor Truscott, seconded Councillor Taylor. Councillor Truscott.
Yeah, I have to believe that, Mr. Mayor. I think it's great to see these local community groups doing all of these grants. It's great to see, and happy to support that.
Councillor Taylor. There's no one against. We'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried. 9 with 2 absent. Yeah. Yeah, 9, but it's unanimous 9. 109 to 115, we've done that. Item 10.3.5, the ex-HMAS Tobruk. This is supplementary agenda number 5. If you're searching for that. 10.3.5, it was a supplementary. Okay. It was... We got a spare? Or you know about? Oh. Yep. Mover is Councillor Everard. Have I got a seconder for this? Councillor Chapman. Councillor Everard.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, this is I think a pretty sensible move to support this one. Look, there will be some trinkets, I guess, or vital bits of equipment that will come off this boat that maybe down the future will be a pretty vital part of our military trail jigsaw, and I would be devastated to think that the Bundaberg Regional Council could snip us and get hold of some of this this equipment. So looking forward to this infrastructure, I guess, finding a home in the future on the Fraser Coast.
Councillor Chapman.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I think this is a great project to support. We've already put $1 million behind this project, and like always talk about the economy. If we can get people coming to student development and coming in and looking in our military trail, it's all good for tourism. So it's $20,000 to store that.
Anyone against this motion? Where's the what? Sorry. No. Tony?
It's on page 276 of the combined agenda, for those of you who are able to open it. So the financial considerations is that Council's asked to consider a budget allocation to a maximum of $20,000 for the Tobruk program to secure the artefacts during the preparation of the ship for scuttling, and this will be from the current economic development operational budget. Yes. So the financial commitment by council is $1.125 million each for and a maximum of $25,000 per annum for the maintenance and monitoring. In addition to this funding, at the ordinary meeting of the 3rd of May, Council resolved to offer up to $50,000 towards a feasibility study, including concept design for the proposed Tobruk History Museum and Fishing Hall of Fame. The feasibility study is not yet finalised, and the cost of that is not yet determined. So what the officers are recommending is, as there is a budget allocation of $50,000 for that, this commitment can be taken out of those funds, and if there is a requirement for additional funding, then they'll address that at the time.
Question?
We have a motion that says that we're going to do a feasibility study and that we're investing $50,000 toward that feasibility study. It sounds to me like this is taking $20,000 from that feasibility study, which a motion has already been passed without any further discussion around with council.
CEO?
I don't believe that's the case. The council's made a resolution in relation to the feasibility study. Until such time that it resolves otherwise, that money still needs to be allocated for that purpose. However, there is funds available in economic development budget for these sorts of activities, and so we're not getting down to tin tacks saying take money from here, take money from there. The fact of the matter, there are funds in the economic development budget for these sorts of activities, and we want to utilise those existing funds without taking away from the feasibility study, unless we come back to council.
Okay. Anybody against this? No. We'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimous. Item 10.4.1 on page 116 to 118. By Councillor Madden. So I'm a mover of that. Councillor Madden, seconded. Councillor Hanson. Councillor Madden. There's a microphone in front of Dennis.
This is one of the... We seem to have come across recently some real issues around street numbering and street naming, and we were shown one today here in Poona where there's a street that's got two ends to it and doesn't meet in the middle. So this is just clarifying and sorting out a situation which makes street numbering and street naming a determined fact, and then carries through to everywhere else. So just cleaning up something that wasn't really very clear.
Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is, I agree with everything that Councillor Madden has said. It's also very much a common sense outcome. It really reflects well on the history of that region out there as well. All the people in that area are for this name, so I think that it's a good thing to do, and I wholly support it.
A question from Councillor Seymour.
Just with the actual name, I assume it's got something to it with an orchard there. So it's Diggers. There's no apostrophe in it. So we're not like, should there be an apostrophe in it? Are we talking about a Digger's Orchard? So perhaps we should change the recommendation to put an apostrophe in Diggers? Wouldn't that normally be, oh, we're not talking about Diggers in the plural, we're talking in the possessive.
Are other, just a question, are other streets named with a little line in the middle? No? Because, sorry, Jamie, will you have an answer? I'm just wondering, in the GPS world of digging up streets and all sorts of things, what's the... Yeah. Okay. Against? Yeah. Yep. Yep. Is moved by anyone against this? No. Those in favour? Those against? Carried, unanimous. Now, we're bringing up a confidential item at item 15.4. We're bringing it into the open session. Page 168 to 172. It shouldn't have been there at the start. Councillor Madden is moving this one, and Councillor Chapman. Councillor Madden.
Yes, councillors. This resolution, or councillor officer's recommendation, has come to council as a result of a motion that I moved some time back. We have an issue down at Glenwood in which the street numbering is very fragmented. The street names are a bit, There's streets that are severed, there is bad numbering. Even residents in Glenwood themselves can't sometimes find the other address that they're looking for in Glenwood. And we've had some fairly serious examples of emergency services, particularly ambulance, being unable to access the property that they need to go to in a timely fashion. In one case, we had a lady end up in intensive care and almost die because of the time frame that it took the ambulance to get there. And it particularly relates to ambulances who do not come out of Gympie but come out of other areas where they're called in. They have no idea of what's going on. So I move the resolution that we address this issue in some manner. I would like to give my heartfelt thanks to council staff. This has turned out to be an absolutely enormous job involving street inspections, involving someone trying to amalgamate 4 different databases to ensure that the property has the right street number, has the right address, and that it's on the rates notice, it's on the property notice. All those things have to be combined together. So there's been a huge amount of work behind the scenes. I mean, I had no idea of the volume of work when I moved that motion. I just know, no, we've got to get it sorted because we don't need people dying. But thank you, my heartfelt thanks to the staff for a really big job, and if this resolution is passed, then there's more work to be done by the staff, and I thank them in advance for that.
Councillor Chapman.
Yes, Mr Mayor. I just think it's great that people can be found, and to have a system of addressing what we've found here is, we've been brought up by Councillor Madden. We've got a major problem in the area of Glenwood, down at this area. When you have a look at the dots all over this map of how many are inconsistent with the rural numbering, there's a lot of dots. One thing I'd just like to ask, and it will not affect this motion today, but the cost to do the rectification of $35,000. Going back years ago, probably 15 years ago, it was all the rural numbering around Harvey Bay, Maryborough area was overseen by a service club, by the Apex Club, which was overseen again by the disaster management team of the Fraser Coast. Now, you may find that there's people in this region, such as the Rural Fire Brigade, the SES that work in this area, may be able to do a project and to rectify the rural numbering. And why I'm saying that is, it gets local people involved in your community, gets local people knowing how the system actually works in there, and it gets people with a heart of what their community is all about, and then maybe this council can give a donation towards them that they can present that into their community as a thought. But I think, Councillor Madden, thank you very much for bringing this up to the region of this numbering. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone against this motion? No. Councillor Light.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. One thing that could be considered for future discussion with some of the councillors here and staff, my experience in New South Wales, again, very frustrating to trying to find an address, and rural addressing can be confusing, there's no doubt about that. There is a method used, it doesn't address every scenario obviously, but there is a opportunity for people to purchase a banner. That banner can be displayed on a fence or it can be displayed on a gate that's fairly large, saying an emergency here. That identifies to the ambulance or police or fire service that is where the emergency is. Now obviously, depending on the scenario, that can not always be deployed. But it's also another capacity. So there's a discussion we can have in the disaster management team and the councillors about maybe having a look at that. Thank you.
We'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried, unanimous. Now we go to item 11.1. Is the realignment of Tinninbar Road off the Kalula Coast Road, page 119. Moved by Councillor Madden. Seconded by Councillor Light. Councillor Madden.
Mr Mayor, sometimes I think being a councillor for Division 2 just keeps popping up little problems that need to be addressed. And this is one of those issues that has been going on for a very long time, fairly much similar to the Glenwood issue, which also went on for a very long time. There's a need to realign the road from the Coollah Coast Road to Tinninbar. The road that's currently used is not a council road. It's a road through the forestry, part of which is bitumen. The dedicated road is a difficult road that has a number of gully crossings, etc., which I think in past years it has been determined that this is the way we need to go. And there has been communication and consultation between council and state government and a number of state government departments. That was ongoing when I was the state member. It is still ongoing. I received some advice back before Christmas that we might have a decision on this matter in January and February. We're now October, we still don't have any kind of decision around this. So this motion, calling for the CEO to see if he can provide some options for how we can move this forward, because otherwise it's just going to sit there forever. No one's going to bite the bullet and do something about it. Tinninbar is the only small coastal community town in the Fraser Coast that doesn't have a dedicated bitumen access road. And I think that carries with it some emergency issues. This motion arose out of sheer frustration on my behalf, but more on the behalf of the community at Tinninbar, who have been trying to get this issue resolved. As a council, we can't do anything about future planning to bitumen this road. It's not going to happen tomorrow. First of all, there needs to be the dedication, then there needs to be all of the engineering works, drawings, designs and the costings, and then we have to budget for it. It could take a significant amount of time to cover off on those things, but we can't start until we get this issue resolved, and that's the purpose of this resolution.
Thank you. Councillor Light. You all right? Anyone against this motion? No. We go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimous. Okay, now we go to item 11.2, which was one of the supplementaries. It's on the subject of a dedicated council emergency centre. Councillor Light will be moving this. A seconder, Councillor Chapman. Councillor Light.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The motion speaks for itself. The background basically is that the council to look at and a report to be come back to council for consideration, establishment of a dedicated emergency control centre. Currently we share that space in Morton Street with other activities. One of the concerns is that if we're activated, we have to bring in a number of items to turn that facility, which is a training room, into our coordination centre. Recently, over a number of years, through different reports and commission of inquiries, there has been criticism of certain councils that have not had a dedicated control centre or emergency control centre. So therefore, the motion is for the Chief Executive Officer to pile a report on the possibility of an operational permanent centre. I wish to stress we're not looking for the Taj Mahal and spending millions of dollars or anything like that. It is just that we can use other council facilities, establishment of electronics and other permanent items in there, and then that to be used for other council activities or community use. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I really think our disaster management system that we've got in council is in good hands. But what I look at is when you going to build a disaster management system, right beside their airport. Now that centre is used for community meetings. It's right beside. It's got the men's shed. It is utilised for other things. But when there is a disaster in the community, everyone knows where the disaster centre is. And I think that this is a plus for our region to set up a centre where it's just plug the computers in and everything's humming. Thank you.
Any other council? Any councillor against? Any councillors for would like to speak? No, we'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Against? Carried. Unanimous. Item 11.3 is a review of councillor discretionary funds. That's a supplementary number 3. Page 269. Moved by councillor Light. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Chapman. Councillor Light.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Putting this motion up to direct the Executive Officer to provide a report to Council that consists of the following. Now, should I we've all got this. Do we need to read it out? No? So should we read it out? Read it out. A, the need for councillor discretionary funding policy. B, measures to strengthen the existing council discretionary funding policy provisions, particularly with respect to transparency, conflict of interest and governance issues, and C, alternative mechanisms to councillors' discretionary funds that would allow for the funding of unplanned community initiatives. Wish to say the discretionary funds has provided the community in the last several years, or a number of years, with great capacity, has achieved so much. I was at Tugam yesterday. We supported, and it was only several $100 for the people that do quilts, for the Children's Hospital and for the nursing homes, and they had 64 quilts presented to the nursing homes of this region. So for 1 second, I'm not saying the discretionary funds have not provided the community with great capacity, great outcomes, and for instance, many of the defibrillators and first aid kits in our community halls are being part through discretionary funds. This is a timely exercise to do in the governance. We always have to review our policies and procedures, and today we had to vote, or not vote, sorry, to declare any conflict of interest with accordance with the Local Government Act. I think the discretionary funds should have a similar parallel need to do that, and a mechanism for reducing the risk or reputational harm to the council. I do believe there will be a report coming or being compiled with the discretionary funds at the moment. This can dovetail that report, and all I'm saying is that we must make sure the perception of the community there is transparency at all times. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Yes, Mr Mayor. I think that this is a motion to be passed here today for us to look at transparency. In Gladstone, the last 3 days we've been up there at the LGAQ, and one thing that's come across out of that LGAQ conference was transparency within government. We are here to serve the people, and we are here to serve with transparency. And I think what this motion is really asking for is to show transparency within our discretionary funds and make sure that we are doing the right thing. And all it is asking is for our CEO to look at the policy and make sure that everything is right. Thank you.
Anyone against this?
Just before we proceed, I just have a question in relation to the motion. It refers to obviously community sentiment in relation to the discretionary fund. I understand that there was an original motion that was presented to council. Can you advise whether that original motion was released via the internet, or was it released publicly? Was it just released to councillors at a briefing session, and then this is the amended motion? Just for clarity, because I'm not sure what the motion is in that actual book, whether it's the current motion. or the original motion?
My understanding, the only motion that's been made available to the general public is the motion that's before us now.
Anyone want to speak against this? Oh.
I just want to seek clarity on that. Obviously, there was, as it was indicated, there was public criticism specifically relating to me in relation to this, and there's no doubt that this motion was certainly informed by that criticism, and I don't want to go into that detail other than to say a subsequent post was made on that social media platform which indicated that a motion was before council in which, and it referred to the former motion, that it would, that council would, and it went through the detail of that motion. So I guess I'm seeking clarity as to whether or not, to your understanding, how that information could have been passed on to that person.
I have no understanding of how that information may have been made available to members of the public. When we discussed the draft motion, at last week's meeting, the instruction was given to staff to make sure that that wasn't distributed because the council indicated that they had a revised position and wanted to amend that motion. And that, as far as I'm aware, I'm getting nods that my instruction was followed. So it certainly hasn't, to the best of my knowledge, hasn't been made available to members of the public by any of my staff.
That's the only question I have at this moment.
Okay, that's...
I'll just be seeking amendments and I'll have to speak.
Yep.
I'd be understanding orders. I'm going to firstly ask the mover and the seconder whether they're amenable to an amendment to the motion. Obviously, it was born out of criticism, particularly around myself, Councillor Seymour and Councillor Truscott.
I have to interrupt. That's an assumption by this councillor.
I can read out the original motion, which has been forwarded on to other people if you like, or I could refer... But you're right, it is my assumption, and an assumption that I believe it was born out of that. It relates to a desire to see a bit more transparency in relation to the discretionary fund. It acknowledges that the discretionary fund is in fact a good initiative, and I understand that the mover was originally moved the idea and floated the idea of the discretionary fund. In that regard, I believe point B is an important part of the report. I'm an advocate for a need for I believe that we do need a discretionary fund, and I don't believe that points A or B relate to the point, A or C necessarily relate to what you're trying to achieve in relation to transparency. I believe that transparency can be achieved through the point B, which is measures to strengthen the existing council discretionary funding policy provisions, particularly with respect to transparency, conflicts of interest and governance issues. I think it would send a mixed message for me to vote on this, support this matter, if I was informing the CEO that I wanted to see other alternative mechanisms, because I believe that this mechanism is appropriate. We've established it, and if there were other mechanisms, they should be done at a time closer to a budget meeting and discussion. So on that basis, I'm seeking from the mover and the seconder that points A and C be deleted, and that point B becomes point A, and that will address the need that you've articulated in your statement.
Councillor Light?
Yeah, I'm not prepared to change the motion. It stands as it is. I can speak to that.
In that case, I move that the amendment that I've stated or the deletions, omissions be amended.
A second for that, Councillor Truscott. So we're all clear on what the amendment is. Would you just like to explain that again?
Yeah, I'll speak to it as the mover of the amended motion. Firstly, it has been identified by some councillors that there needs to be further measures to strengthen the council discretionary fund. That is not in dispute, and it's good that these policies are reviewed. It was also indicated through this process that this review was already raised by other members of council, and that a review was currently in place. The issue then relates to what are we trying to communicate to the staff and to the CEO as far as the discretionary fund. Councillor Light indicated that he supported the discretionary fund. The resolution as it stands looks at whether there is a need for a councillor discretionary fund. We considered this at 2 budget cycles ago. We considered it at length, and we decided that it was required. It addressed a need within the community, and that in every case that you've mentioned that there are some really great outcomes. In that basis, the need for a councillor, I believe there is a need, and the matters that you've raised will be addressed in point B. So on that basis, I seek this amendment.
Second to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, happy to second the amendment. I think, as Councillor Taylor has addressed, that there is a need for it. It has been used for many great things, as has already been said. And I raised with the CEO, it was probably over a month ago, asking for a review on the policy, and I think it was only at last week's briefing that we were advised that a review that is already underway is about 87%, I think was the figure quoted, of happening. So I think for this, as you said, to dovetail into that review is a good process, and as you've highlighted, it will address any issues that could arise in point B.
Thank you. Speaker against? Councillor Light.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that if we're assuming that we are fount of all knowledge, as some people say, we're not. We've got a new CEO, new directors in this council now that have brought to our attention many different ways and much more experience, or a lot of experience in local government. It's only calling for a report. This is only for a report. The need for discretionary funding, the report will have an opportunity to vote on. And alternative mechanisms for council discretionary funding, well, again, we've got the chance to vote on it. Why limit something when we have an opportunity to vote on it, yes or no, or to change it, whatever it is, in future meetings? I'm sorry, I just don't understand your methodology or your thoughts behind that. I'd also, and I don't know if it's appropriate for me to, I think, to speak against some of the comments that were made. Mr. CEO, Mayor, do I get a chance to...
Yeah, you're speaking against the motion.
Okay, all right. I want to make, I'll say it anyway, and unless I'm shut down, I want to make this very clear, very crystal clear. I hate social media. In fact, I deliberately never try and look at it because it's so negative and vicious. Gentlemen, you need to be aware that the community, can we say, questions on this is not through, my motivation wasn't through social media or the criticism of any particular councillor. I can tell you I have a business that has over 500 to 800 people a day, and it's a great cross-section of the community, and I can tell you there was questions asked. Perception. We do everything in our life by perception, not reality. And I'm saying to you that the perception was not good for this council and reputational harm. Now, you don't have to defend in this room, any of you, what you've done. At the end of the day, you have to defend it with the community. Now, the thing is that this will provide a report once more for us to make a determination on, and let's see what the other opportunities are, and a mixture of both of discretionary funds and other types of funds, grants that we can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillor for? Councillor Seymour?
I'll just speak really quickly because I think this improves the motion. I'm for transparency. I'm for improving the process of the policy which Councillor Light said he supports in terms of discretionary funds. We brought in discretionary funds a couple of years ago into our budget. At the time I didn't support it, but as a majority we all did, and I've come to think that they are useful in terms of throughout the year being able to support different organizations in a way that has proved very beneficial if you look back at all the grants that have been made. And I think what, as I understood, Councillor Light was moving this request for was ways to strengthen transparency and accountability in that policy, not to call into question the whole aspect of it, which is done every year during the budget process. every year during the budget process, we consider what we fund and what we don't. We consider the budget policies, and this is one of the budget policies that was approved again this year for the current budget. And if we're not happy with it, we don't have to include it for the budget next year.
Thank you. This is on the amendment that Councillor Taylor put up. One against. Any other councillor against? Do you want to write a reply?
Will work. Other than to say, in my original statement, I made it clear that I believed, and it was my assertion, that this motion was born out of criticism that was made against certain councillors, and that was there was conjecture to that. And then, Councillor, you just informed the room that that was in fact the reason why you referred to 800 people that enter your premises and the community sentiment. So there is no doubt in my mind that the two are very much related. I have no objection to transparency, and I'll answer any question in relation to the matter. I have no conflict. I'm not corrupt. I believe that this will address the policy concerns that a lot of councillors have. I'm happy to support it, but I also support discretionary fund. And if I will reconsider it, I'll do it during budget time and the budget cycle, which is the appropriate time to do it.
Sorry, Rob. Hold on. Roll. Point of order, mate. We'll go to the vote on the amendment. Yes, that the amendment be made. Moved by Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Truscott. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4. So the amendment is now the motion. Or do we go back?
Rolf has a right of reply. He's the one that's right of reply.
Yeah.
No, item 13.3, in the event the amendment is carried, the councillor moved the original motion has a right of reply to the amended motion. So Rolf has a right of reply.
Councillor Light? Councillor Light?
Thank you, Mr. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's been enough said. I think we need to move on. I think we all recognise the discretionary funds have done some great work. It doesn't mean that they can't be massaged or changed and examined for the future. But and also, again, my comments were of concerns in the community without mentioning councillors' names, because in most instances they don't. In fact, I don't think any of them did. It's the perception of us as a group that we make sure that we have the best transparency and limit that conflict of interest. Thank you.
Okay. So we go to the vote on the amended motion. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Unanimous.
Mr. Mayor, I think I need to make another statement and direct this to the CEO.
Don't make a statement and ask questions.
It's just a question, is it, Rob?
Questions or...
Not to do with I'm very concerned about the reports that a document that was confidential, so that has been released in some way, and I ask you to investigate that matter.
I'll take that as genuine business, Mr. Mayor.
Yep. It's taken. Item 11.4, possible de-amalgamation, supplementary agenda number 4. Need to go to...
You need to move a motion that we adjourn.
Yeah, Yep. Yep. It's just,
We'll just talk
it's
amongst
okay.
ourselves for 3
The
minutes.
what?
Yeah, well, we don't need to formally break,
No,
just,
no, no.
just slow
It's
down.
just-
Yeah.
He's on a heap of antibiotics.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's right. Yep. Item 11.4, possible de-amalgamation, supplementary agenda 4. It's a very short statement.
I so move.
Councillor Hanson. Moved by Councillor Hanson. Have I got a seconder? No.
Did he tell you who'd second it?
I would certainly welcome a second to the motion just for the purpose of debate, and I think that would be very gutsy and show you had balls.
For it to go further. Yeah, he's back. Councillor Hanson. Councillor Hanson has moved the item 11.4. Is there a seconder? No seconder. It lapses.
I don't get an opportunity to speak, do I, Mr. Chairman? Bugger.
Item 12.1.
Mr Mayor, if I could interject, I'm seeking to suspend standing orders with your permission. I understand Councillor David Lewis has to remove himself from the meeting to go to a funeral, and I was wondering if it was prudent that we could do a condolence motion at this time before he leaves in relation to the passing of Trevor Cecil.
Yep, certainly, Councillor Taylor.
Yep. So that standing orders be suspended to progress with a condolence motion.
And Cohen Ashton. And Cohen Ashton. Ashton.
We'll do them as two separate ones, if that's okay. Yep.
Okay. Yep. The
So
motion.
if I could put the motion.
By Councillor Taylor.
Well,
Seconded Councillor Everard. Councillor Taylor.
I can form the actual motion, and it's something that I would like to see come into our standing orders, that for condolence motions we don't simply raise our hands but we stand as a sign of respect. So I'd be seeking that we, so I'll allow Councillor Seymour to do the second condolence motion, that we stand in recognition of the life of Trevor Cecil and his contribution to the Fraser Coast community.
Seconded. Councillor Everard.
It's a deep shame that we have lost another past citizen here of the Fraser Coast, and Trevor, everyone who knew of Trevor Cecil, he had an unmistakable laugh and was the first one to put his hand up to help community when someone was in need. So thanks very much, Councillor Taylor.
And Drew, we'll move mine at the same time? Yeah, do it separately, yeah.
One by one. Okay. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Councillor Seymour.
I move that we stand in recognition of the life of Cohen Ashton, a life tragically cut short, but one that will continue to inspire for many years to come.
Second. Councillor Light. Yep. You want us to stand?
Well, that was the
Those in
motion,
favour?
yeah. That was the motion that we stand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Condolence motion for Rosemary Daly. Rosemary, I've known for some time at Burham Heads. Eric is the husband. She was only 61 and died serving the community at the community centre, which she used to do all the time. a tragic loss at a very young life. She was very high profile in the fishing club in Barham Heads, helped tremendously in the tornado for nearly 10 days non-stop. So I'd like to put that motion forward. Second.
Councillor Madden. Okay. We'll stand again. Those in favour? Okay. You're leaving now? Yeah, no, good. Thanks, Dave.
Maybe note that Dave's attending the funeral on council's behalf.
Yep. Councillor Lewis is leaving and representing councillor. Thanks, Dave. Okay. Item 12.1. Page 120, regarding the extraction of water from Milia Creek. There's water everywhere. Yes?
The name of the person who put the question, but this one doesn't. I assume it was Councillor Seymour. Does that want to be reflected on? Does that it's normally reflected in the question, and I can see in the next report it is Councillor Truscott, but it's not referred to in this one. Just for clarity, it was Councillor Seymour who made the question, raised the question.
Moved by Councillor Seymour. Is there a seconder? Councillor Taylor. Councillor Seymour.
Yeah, it turned out they were pumping water from the creek without valid permit, and they've since been advised. And obviously, there's not so much need for it now, but there was, in order to pump water from a water body like that, a permit from the council is required.
Councillor Taylor. Those in favour? Against? Carried. Unanimous. 12.2. Question on notice regarding the Ulula Skate Park. Moved by Councillor Truscott. Seconded by Councillor Everard. Councillor Truscott.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick one. Yeah, happy to see that we're coming to a conclusion on that. This is one of the great projects from the Works for Queensland funding, with a lot of stuff that's happening there at Ulula Park, and it's great driving past there now and seeing it almost at completion. And the skate park's looking huge, and there's just a few more little nice touch-ups to do around it. And looking forward to the opening the official opening on the 4th of November.
Councillor Everard. Those in favour? Carried unanimous. Item 14.1, Councillors' request for leave of absence, supplementary agenda number 2. 14.1. Sorry. Moved by Councillor Light. 14.1. Sorry, 263. Page 263. Moved by Councillor Light. Seconded by Councillor Madden. Councillor Light. Councillor Madden.
Leave is necessary and important.
And encouraged. Yep. Anyone against it? No. Those in favour? Start the car now. We're down to
Confidential.
There we go. The confidential.
Do we go to general?
Explain this. Yeah, we'll do general business. We'll go around. James. Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to first of all thank the Poona community for allowing us to use their hall today. I think it's a great initiative to go out to the outlying areas. I share something very much in common with the Poona community. I live on the other extreme end of the Fraser coast. It's about 120 k's, I think, from here to my place, so I understand very much what it's like. So well done, and I look forward to doing many more of these events in the outlying areas. I think maybe somewhere like Tyro or even Bushfire should be next on the line. Just want to also say that the rain was really good. It's certainly been a welcome addition. Speaking as a dairy farmer, I don't mind walking around in mud, so it's been a welcome thing to come. But I'd like to also thank the council workers who have been out there working hard even during the rain to repair the damage that occurred, so well done to all those.
Is there anyone else with some general business? Councillor Lyde?
Are we going? I thought we
You can.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of items. So, to the CEO, do I need to formally ask for that investigation regarding that document? You're taken already at that. Thank you very much. I think it's very important. On the rain event that we've just recently had, I'd like to particularly thank the senior staff, directors, and also the council staff that were out and about doing patrolling, and also for all their hard work. They're actually fixing potholes when it was just virtually finished raining. Many of the badly pothole roads are state roads, just letting everyone know in the room. Look, it was very proud to be part of that team. I thank Devendra, I thank Brendan Guy for all the work in council, and there were some fairly late nights there and trying to get all the information out to everyone. I think we've got a really strong team in that area and very proud to be part of it. I've already said that once, but let's hope we don't have too much more.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor. Just give it quick, but the last 3 days I said we were at the LGAQ conference, and there was a guest speaker there, Zelda. She was Nelson Mandela's EA, and she spoke about her life, of how she grew up under a family and everything like that. And she went and worked for Mr. Mandela. She addressed him as Mr. Mandela all the time. And one point she put across is, we're all human, we all can work together, and it's about getting on and doing the job. Her dad, who first commented about Mr. Mandela, was actually called him a terrorist, said he was a terrorist. And as she said, later in life, her dad was planting trees on Mr. Mandela's property as a volunteer and when he retired. So it just goes to show you that we can all work together in a community, and we all pull together, we make a better region for the whole of the Fraser Coast. Thank you.
Councillor Madden.
Yes, just to thank the Poona community again. You're always very welcoming when I come down here. I'm really pleased that you've put the welcome on that you have for council. It's lovely to be here with you, and I look forward to more of these occasions. Thank you.
I too want to thank the Poona community for welcoming us here. I'm glad you've found it worthwhile enough to stick around and watch, and we hope we haven't bored you, but it's been, this is a fantastic community, a beautiful environment, and you can see that it's really a very cohesive community that raises real practical issues that are of concern, and really is a vibrant community that really is something that the whole Fraser Coast can be proud of.
Yeah, and I too would like to thank the Poona community for their hospitality and giving us a guided tour of the sites of Poona this morning, so thank you very much. Mr. CEO, if you could pass on the thanks of the community of Riverheads, Wrongheads, after the storm event a couple of weeks ago. A lot of positive comment from the council staff and their dedication and the way they handled themselves, looking after the people out there at Riverheads when that storm went through. It was greatly appreciated, and the officers made there's a lot of very happy residents with the efforts of our officers. And again, as what Councillor Light indicated with their disaster crew, the information that came out was great that we didn't have any panic buying of bread and milk in Harvey Bay this time around. So well done to Brendan and the team.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Mr Mayor, I want to make a comment in relation to some of the media that has been raised in relation to allegations of corruption of myself and also inappropriate conduct of other councillors. And I just want to make it clear that I am the president of Football Queensland Wide Bay, which has a team that's entering into the 2018 competition for the Queensland Premier League in 2018. This is an incredible outcome for our community. I am not the operational arm of Football Queensland Wide Bay. The operational arm is a general manager who is employed by Football Queensland, and one of his KPIs is to seek funding on behalf of the organisation through state, federal and local and other sources. That's his requirement. He did that in good faith, and anything to do with council, as I've made clear in my involvement with the board of Football Queensland Wide Bay, that I'm not to be involved in. So any time it is discussed in relation to council, I remove myself from the room, and therefore the general manager did not think it was appropriate that he involved me in the application process, which is the most prudent thing for a general manager to do. He made application through the process, completed the appropriate forms, and forwarded on to, I believe, 4 councillors, of which 2 effectively approved it, and I can assume, because I've never asked for information on it, that 2 did not. I found that out by reading a social media post and reading it in the paper. I was not informed by any person, and even I understand that the general manager also was informed through social media, as I understand. He placed the application to council. I did not have any discussions with any councillor in relation to this matter, because again, I was not aware that the applications had been made until after they had been made. There was no mechanism for me or any other councillor to declare a conflict, and there's no legislative breach, or in my submission, no ethical breach. I have not acted corruptly, inappropriately. I've served my community in a range of areas, but sport is a passion that I have, but I understand the conflicts that relate to both my position on Football Queensland Wide Bay, my position as the president of the Quangan and Sandy Straits Jets, my position in a range of other boards. I take that very seriously. I act with integrity, and at no point was I corrupted, or asked any other councillor to take action that was inappropriate. My greatest disappointment that there is a general manager, an employee of Football Queensland Wide Bay, who sought assistance in funding as any other organisation has, whether it be football, rugby league, rugby union, AFL, tennis, netball. They have all received funding from council and have followed similar processes. In this case, he made the application. He made applications to councillors, and his rationale, it would be a matter for him to determine why he made it to certain councillors. My understanding is he made it towards councillors who also supported the sports precinct, and that made sense for him to do that. He now feels as though he has somehow created a rift or created an issue within Football Queensland Wide Bay, to which I publicly and privately confirm he has not. I'm proud of the effort he does as our general manager. He has my utmost support, and I once again make it quite clear that there has been no corruption or inappropriate behaviour in relation to this matter on my part or any other councillor or any member of Football Queensland Wide Bay.
Councillor Truscott.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Again, just to reiterate some of the comments that have been said, thank you to Poona and the residents here for having us here this morning. And one of the, I'd just like to raise a question on notice about that, if I can. An issue that was raised with us this morning was the need for a green waste dump site here. So I don't know if that's something I can ask in a question on notice, if we're able to investigate the possibility of having a green waste dump site here at Poona.
Okay. For the people that have participated here today, we are going to confidential matters. This is over contracts, and so unfortunately you've all just got to leave. But hopefully it's a short while. I'm hoping that this will go quickly. So, and then we'll come back and see you soon. The ladies in the kitchen, Ken went and had a yarn with. Yeah.